Welcome to Discovery Watch with John Kaiser.
I'm your host, Jim Goddard. Welcome back to the show, John.
Jim, I'm happy to be back.
John, is Scandium International any closer to securing a deal that allows it to recover scandium and other critical metals from an American copper oxide heap leach operation?
Well, Jim, it's been 6 months since early May when Scandium International announced its new plan to recover scandium and other critical metals from the raffinate that's produced by the copper oxide heap leach operations from about a dozen. There's a dozen of such in the United States, and the copper ends up being recovered through solvent extraction, the SX, and then turned into copper cathode through electrowinning, the EW, or the SX-EW equation. But since then, the only news that the company has published was one in September about filing patents for doping the various components of a lithium-ion battery with scandium to supposedly produce a much more effective lithium-ion battery. And the market that caught the market's interest a little bit, but because the details are secret, will be secret until a year after the patents were filed, and even then it'll be a number of years before, anything is commercialized if indeed this doping works. Market has shrugged its shoulders on that. Now, the lithium-ion battery news is very interesting for the lithium-ion battery sector because the press release claimed that by adding scandium to the cathode, the electrolyte, and the anode typical components, it could make the lithium-ion battery better. Now, the cathode is where the lithium sits, and the cobalt has traditionally been part of that because there is a risk of thermal runaway arising from the lithium. But more recently, manganese and nickel has been increasingly replacing the cobalt part of that. And adding the scandium to the manganese apparently would enhance the stability of the cathode. And of course, the anode in most cases is graphite, but there is a type of anode made of niobium titanium. Toshiba is working on one version, and apparently adding scandium to that enhances its stability also. But what was interesting was the suggestion that a solid electrolyte doped with scandium could be effective. Now, right now, the electrolyte it's that layer between the cathode and the anode through which the ions pass. It is made of an organic liquid. And ideally, the best anode would be lithium itself. But when it is used, the flow of these ions causes these dendrites to form, which are almost like icicles, and these are in danger of puncturing the membrane, and then of course you get a short circuit within the electrolyte, and you get thermal runaway, and you get the explosion. So lithium as anode is absolutely impossible, even though that would make the lithium-ion battery way, way better than it currently is. So the holy grail is a solid-state electrolyte, which is not vulnerable to these dendrites forming from a lithium anode. So this is a long-term interesting thing about this press release Scandium International put out. If doping various materials, solid materials that could be used for the electrolyte, makes them effective and prevents these dendrites from forming when lithium is used as the anode, that could be a huge thing down the road. But the market is really right now focused on the company getting a hosting deal with one of these 12 copper oxide operations in the United States. A bunch of them are in Arizona. Freeport operates 6 of them, so that's one candidate. There's the Phoenix skarn copper gold deposit in Nevada, which Newmont used to own, but it's now part of the Barrick Newmont Nevada Gold joint venture, so it's not clear that they're going to be working on that. And then there's other deposits that El Sarco used to own, which is now owned by Grupo Mexico, but that would mean that Scandium International would have to deal with Grupo Mexico, which is infamous as being one of the most plotting of all mining companies out there. And then there is, of course, Excelsior with its Gunnison project, but it's unlikely that they've been dealing with them because they have been still making sure that their in-situ leach recovery system is working. And they just put out a press release this week announcing that they seem to have got all the problems solved. So maybe that's something down the road where Scandium International could get a hosting deal set up with that operation. But right now the market suspects they're probably dealing with Freeport, but man, is it taking a long time to become a reality. The company has not updated its March pre-COVID presentation, which still pretends that it's a letter of intent strategy for developing offtake deals, is still live. They spent the past 2 years working on this strategy to fill the order book for the Ningen planned output by cultivating a dozen plus different potential end users, showing them how aluminum scandium master alloy can help them with their product lines. But at the end of the day, they all said, or not all of them, but most of them said, we love the idea, but what can you deliver us this stuff next week if we order it? Saying, no, we first need to raise $100 million, and then we need to build this and commission it and make sure it works as planned, and then we'll deliver it to you. And so they all pretty much said, well, we love the idea of aluminum scandium alloy to lightweight our product lines, but call us when you are ready to deliver the master alloy to us. And that's called the chicken-egg problem for scandium. It has even defeated Robert Friedland, whose clean tech has pretty much given up on this idea of becoming a primary scandium producer. It's now focused on trying to get the nickel cobalt Sunrise deposit into production, which has a lower grade scandium component, which they would simply stockpile as a byproduct in a warehouse until there's enough supply built up that the aluminum end users say, okay, yes, we would like to buy that. So the entire scandium space has been pretty much stalled, going nowhere. And yet what's peculiar is we've seen bids start creeping into the Scandium International market during the past week or so, which suggests that maybe the company is closer to a deal than you would guess by just looking at their marketing and the lack of press releases. And even if you manage to get through to the company and talk to the CEO, George Putnam, you will be pretty much left with the sense that, well, we are working on, it's like 95% of our focus, but until it happens, we can't say anything. If it were to happen, it would really be a big deal, not just for Scandium International, but also for the scandium sector, because what this whole plan is about is to recover maybe five tons per year from each of these copper oxide mines, 5 tons of scandium. That could make a lot of master aluminum alloy. The company would be able to incrementally build up its own scandium supply. It could introduce meaningful amounts of master alloy to the various end users. They could start to gradually start using the product, play with it, whereas before they were just dealing with tiny amounts of master alloy that Scandium International would manufacture from scandium oxide scavenged from China, where apparently the supply has dried up, so you can't really get scandium oxide very easily anymore. But what would make this thing exciting beyond just having the basis to gradually build up scandium supply to the point where you can fill an order book to get Ningen funded and crank out anywhere from 35 to 100 tons per year is the potential to recover other critical metals. And with the election now, with the Biden presidency in place, we're already seeing that Biden is not going to stand down from China and say, yeah, okay, let's be pals again. Today he announced that using the Senkaku Islands as his reference point, that we intend to defend the East China Sea with Japan. That was a serious slap in the face for Xi Jinping. America saying, nope, we're not going to let you expand your footprint in this area. We are going to defend our allies. And that's really going to really put more spotlight on the whole critical metal space, in particular, ultimately, the rare earths. And the United States has been concerned about critical metals that it has an import dependency on. Strangely, there are things like manganese and beryllium on this list. And manganese is something that SCY has identified as recoverable from the raffinate from these copper oxide operations. Nickel also, although that's not such a big deal. And of course, cobalt is also recoverable, and that's interesting because if you could recover a meaningful supply of cobalt from these copper oxide mines, here you would have an ESG certifiable source that is clearly conflict-free and might even command a premium from the likes of Apple, who want to be able to prove to the world that the cobalt that's in their iPhones is not surreptitiously coming from these various warlord conflict areas and being blended with official production from the Congo. And something like beryllium, America is the biggest, 90% biggest producer of beryllium in the world from the Spore Mountain deposit in Utah. It's owned by Materion, which used to be called Brush-Wellman. And you ask yourself, why would they put beryllium on the critical metals list? Well, the problem is that very high purity beryllium used in nuclear and military applications cannot be made from the bertrandite ore, which is why the United States, or in this case Materion as the primary manufacturer of downstream beryllium products, imports beryl from places like Kazakhstan and Colombia. And beryl is the less precious version of emerald, and it can be processed into a high purity beryllium. Now, the company hasn't mentioned that beryllium is something they've seen in the solution, but if it were, and they finally had some deal and came out and announced it, that would be of interest, not in huge dollar terms, but suddenly the United States, the people upstairs would be saying, whoa, this could be very, very important. If we can have a domestic supply of a secure supply of high purity beryllium, that would be a very big deal, and we would definitely want this to be expanded to all the operations. And of course, if Scandium International has managed to get a good deal with the likes of Freeport, a win-win for both sides, that could be a huge boost, not just for the ability to domestically generate scandium on an incremental basis, but to also produce these other metals such as manganese, which would come out in the sulfate form, or not quite sulfate, but a precursor to sulfate with high enough purity that you can make manganese sulfate, and in the case of nickel too, nickel sulfate, which is what the battery makers need. They need the higher purity form of these metals, not the lower grade form that you get from the LME or from the manganese ore operations, which is mainly fed into the steel making process. So we're not there yet, and the markets are quite frustrated, but there are signs that it might be coming closer, and everybody, at least on my subscriber base, is waiting to stop hearing the Prussian anthem, Immer langsam voran, finally being turned on and have this thing go ahead full speed and take off in the way that everybody has expected it would a long time ago.
We'll have more with John Kaiser right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines. Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome back. We're talking with John Kaiser. John, Consolidated Wood Jam jumped this week on results. Have we learned anything new?
Well, Jim, the Wood Jam property, which has the southeast primarily copper zone and several gold-enriched copper zones, of which Deerhorn is the best, it has had about $30 million spent on it in the past 15 years. Most of it in that period, 2009 to 2013, when Goldfields had this under option, and it's quite difficult to come up with something really new for a system like this. But this hole was new in the sense that the grade was better than the best hole pulled by Goldfields in the Deerhorn zone, and that old hole was number 48, and it ran 264 meters of 1.45 gram per ton gold and 0.26% copper. This hole, which is really an infill hole, which is why the stock didn't rock it, it pulled 110 meters of 2.59 gram per ton gold and 0.44% copper. And it was drilled about 50 meters to the northwest of hole 48, and there's other holes to the northwest of that, and it was a little bit higher up in the system than where the hole 48 went through. But this hole, in a sense, was a disappointment. It was stopped at 380 meters, but to get to there, it had taken more than twice as long as was expected. The purpose of this hole was, yes, to infill the known system, but to also probe to the west of it at depth for parallel structures. Unlike the southeast zone, which is more of a standard porphyry blob, in the Deerhorn area and then the Megabach and the Tacom, which is off to the northwest from where the southeast zone is located, these are more these sort of elongated tabular-like porphyritic intrusions. In this case, it's the monzonite A unit, which has all the mineralization in it and also in the wall rocks surrounding it. When Goldfields tackled this project, its focus was completely open pittable resource. And there's a little lake to the southwest of the Deerhorn area called Mica Lake. It's actually really a puddle, but Goldfields was reluctant to get too close to it. This hole was an angled hole was supposed to drill underneath Mica Lake and see if there were additional parallel units that might be part of the Deerhorn system. You say, oh gosh, you're gonna go empty some little lake and that's really great for open pit permitting. But the really big story for Deerhorn is what happens at depth. And that's where the second hole is really important. This hole was spotted right on the same line as 48, and it was drilled as a near vertical hole to a depth of 617 meter. That pretty much doubles the depth that Goldfields assessed when it had this project under exploration. Now the Deerhorn resource, it's 32.8 million tons of just under a half gram gold and 0.22% copper, which is okay, but 33 million tons is not really anything to get excited about. But the question that the Wood Jam management team, Bill Morton and Glenn Garrett, are really trying to assess is, with this type of high K calc alkaline porphyry system, what happens here at depth? In some cases, the gold and copper grade will actually get better at depth. And so this hole's purpose is to go right down the throat of the mineralized unit and measure what the bottom half of this hole is. They already have a rough idea of what the upper half is. And we won't know those results until about 4 weeks from now, early December, because they were only shipped for assay 2 weeks ago. They did intersect sulfides. Because these units aren't just one big tabular block, they're more interfingered things. It'll be interesting to see how the grade alternates within this hole. And But it will tell us if when you go deep, do you have block caving grades show up? And do you have sufficient thicknesses to make this worthwhile? And this, in a sense, is the Kodiak copper story with its MNP deposit in southern British Columbia, where the near-surface open-pittable mineralization is not interesting even from an open-pit perspective. But when you get down to the 300-meter depth, that's where you start getting significantly better gold and copper grades, and that's what enabled Kodiak Copper to raise almost $13 million earlier this year at a substantial markup, about 5-6 times of where it was trading at before it announced these results, those results this summer. So the hope with Woodjam is that a similar development will take place at depth, that we have high-grade gold, copper present. And the third hole that they drilled, which is a mere 25-meter step out to the southeast of hole 48, it also is technically an infill hole, though it's drilled in the strike direction where the grade starts to diminish within 100 meters. So it'll be interesting to see how quickly the grade in the upper 300 meters diminishes. But that hole was pushed to a significantly deeper level. It was to about 692 meters, which is about 668 meters vertical. And they basically drilled this hole as long as they were seeing sulfide. So the message is that hole accomplished what the first hole failed to accomplish because it couldn't be pushed far enough. They appear to have intersected parallel mineralized units which don't show up in the near surface estimates of the existing resource that Gold Fields did, but the grade is going to be key. And again, this hole will show up in about 4 or 5 weeks. They sent this one in batches, so we should get the whole back in partials rather than all in one shot, such as will be the case with the second hole. And their plans to drill a fourth hole, which was a IP target to the northeast of the southeast zone, which is a 228 million ton copper deposit with minor moly and gold credits. That IP target, Goldfields drilled a hole on the edge of it in 2013. Appeared to nick the edge of a disseminated system. They wanted to put a hole right in the middle of this to see if they have maybe 50 to 100% more tonnage of similar southeast grade mineralization. That would make the open pittable copper scenario much more interesting from a big miner's perspective. But they were unable to get that hole started because the ground has not been frozen enough. The logging company said, if you go in there before we do, and you tear up that hole, the road, you're going to be responsible for paying for it. So they said, okay, we'll wait until the first quarter of next year to take a shot at that target. But by then, we should know whether the deeper part of the Deerhorn zone does have enhanced gold copper grades. It was encouraging to see in the upper part the best grades yet reported for that system. But no, it's not yet a new discovery, but there is evidence for potential new discovery, but we won't know until early December.
We'll have more with John Kaiser right after this.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
Value from success. Growth in discovery. Golden Arrow Resources is a well-funded gold-copper exploration company with proven management and prospective properties in Chile, Argentina, and Paraguay. Golden Arrow trades on the Toronto Venture Exchange, symbol GRG, on Frankfurt, symbol G6A, and the OTCQB, symbol GARWF. For more information, visit us at goldenarrowresources.com or call Sean at 778-686-0135.
Welcome back. We're speaking with John Kaiser. John, do you have any new discoveries that we at Discovery Watch should be paying attention to?
Jim, last week I introduced a new favorite to my readers called Northern Superior Resources with a good spec value rating. Now, I followed this company for more than a decade. What always interested me was the TPK project, which they generated in northwestern Ontario, west of the McFowles Lake Ring of Fire area. They had originally explored for diamonds in that area, and in the till sampling, they managed to get an awful lot of gold grains, and they ended up developing what still ranks as the largest gold in till anomaly in North America. And there's been several drill programs done since then. Rainy River, before it got bought out by New Gold, it attempted a drill program. More recently, Yamana spent $2 million in 2019 to drill the property, and it got some gold results, but still no obvious discovery, and Yamana decided to drop out at the end of last year. Now, the work that they did when Tom Morris, who has been stuck with the company, in charge of the company since about 2007 or 8, when they looked at it closely, they came to a startling realization as to why this play has frustrated all efforts to find the high-grade gold source of the gold in till, pristine grains, as well as gold mineralized boulders, suggesting that there is a significant gold system. And they realized that they'd always assumed that the structural orientation was east-west, and all the drilling was always of a north-south orientation. And when they looked at the results from the Yamana drilling, which they operated, they said, oh no, the structural orientation is northwest, southeast. So they're ready to go back in there with a properly oriented drill program to finally hit the mineralized zones that are the source of this extraordinary gold in till anomaly. But those plans were derailed by the COVID pandemic that erupted in March. They hope to be able to get back in there in the first quarter. They managed to raise a lot of money this year. The turning point was when Michael Gentili adopted the company in December last year with a 7-cent financing that dug poor Tom Morris out of the hole that the company had sunk into when Yamana dropped the option. And since then, they've boosted the treasury to $6 million. $3.7 million of that is flow through. In January, they'll spend $2 million on the TPK project in Ontario. But the key is to get the First Nations group to become comfortable that their mobilization plans will not infect the local community with COVID. And with COVID taking off everywhere as the second month of the regular 7-month flu season gets underway, it's not guaranteed that this will happen. But the reason I made Northern Superior a favorite good spec value rated pick last week was they announced the first hole of a 12-hole drill program done on the Lac Suprise project, which ironically they've held since about 2005. And it's southwest of Chibougamau, and the big story in that region is the Nelligan discovery, originally staked by Vanstar, adjoining to the east of the Lac Suprise project, where last year IAMGOLD, the partner, which will end up with 80%, leaving Vanstar Resources with a 20% carry interest, it announced an open-pittable resource of 3.2 million ounces at just over 1 gram per ton. And they've only really chased this to shallow depths, but it's a different style of mineralization from the usual greenstone belt type of orogenic mineralization. It's disseminated. It tends to be hosted by the sediments. And the Renard zone, it's about a couple kilometers long, IAMGOLD has been slowly advancing it. It's been driving poor Vanstar crazy. They recently had a complete management rotation with a new group headed by Victor Cantor of Amex in charge to try and turn around this situation. Vanstar itself has generated several other projects which they think are similar in geological potential. They don't even have a name for this style of deposit yet. It might even end up being called Nelligan style. But they became quite interested in what Northern Superior was doing to the west. And Doug Andrews, who had consulted to Vanstar, he also consulted to Northern Superior, helped them understand what they should be looking for. They had done a drill program last year, which intersected some mineralization in the volcanics. But this year, they did a very deep dive on all the data that has been generated by IAMGOLD, the data that they generated from the geophysics, and they realized that they have a 7-kilometer extension of the Nelligan system, and there's still a 1.4 kilometer gap between the Renard zone and the Northern Superior Lac Suprise border, where the IAMGOLD has yet to drill any holes. But this first hole that they reported, it wasn't a spectacular hole, but it was one which, for people who understood the context, it was very significant. Now, if you saw a press release that says we hit 35.5 meters of 1.02 gram per ton gold and 3.92 gram per ton silver, you would have a hard time stifling a big yawn. But in the context, this is the type of mineralization that the Nelligan deposit is all about, and it's the same sort of rocks extending to the west as modeled from the surface mapping and the geophysical interpretation of what's making this all happen. And this is only the first of 4 targets that they have tested with 12 holes. And the company was able to, it jumped on the news that very day, that night I recommended it. It jumped even more the next day. This week they announced a $1.5 million financing, 80-cent unit and higher priced flow through. The next day they upsized it to $3 million. I asked Tom, well, you're going to end up upsizing it to $6 million. He says, no, we want to keep the capital structure relatively low. We want to see the upside blossom for the shareholders that have supported this. We have 11 more holes come. In our news release, we said we are eagerly looking forward to the results, which is kind of hyperbolic. I'm surprised the IROC news police didn't force them to eliminate that from the press release. What it in essence means is that if you use sulfides as the key indicator for gold potential, and you've got the same sort of rocks as Nelligan, a lot of the other holes have a better sulfide composition than the very first one they drilled, which is right on the boundary. So if what they're seeing in the first hole in terms of mineralogy and host rock holds for these other holes, these targets stretched over 7 kilometers, these guys potentially have a very significant Nelligan scale, perhaps bigger than Nelligan scale, discovery to the west in a part of the property that historically has not received any exploration attention. So Northern Superior's Lac Suprise project is definitely now on our discovery watch list, and the TPK project in Ontario, that's going to also be on our watch list for next year, because that could also turn out to be a major gold discovery if and when they finally get to drill it from what they now think is the correct angle to intersect the mineralized zones.
John, thank you so much for the update.
You're welcome, Jim.
We've been speaking with John Kaiser, his website, kaiserresearch.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on Discovery Watch are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at howstreet.com. Discovery Watch is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.